Hi, folks. This is Chris Jenkins, and with me I have our lead singer, Josh Feemster. We're with Gold City, and we're bringing you this podcast. This is the very first one, and we just are here to tell you a little bit about what the podcast is going to be about, how it's going to be structured, and a lot of important things that...
a lot of unimportant things.
That's true. Just a gist of the things that you can expect from the podcast. We're so excited about it. This is out of the norm for us, and so this is something new that we hope you'll enjoy. Maybe another way that we can connect with you folks out there.
Well, this is one of the things that we do to pass time out on the road is just sit around and talk. And you know, most everybody probably thinks we just watch TV or on the phone or whatever, and we do that a lot too. But we do just a lot of sitting around talking about different subjects, and there's a lot of different subjects that come up. I'm a podcast junkie. I listen to a lot of different things, and people think that we always get the question, okay, what music do you guys listen to? What do y'all listen to when you're driving down the road or whatever? I hardly ever listen to any music. The music I listen to is usually the songs we've recorded that I've got to learn to sing live on stage. So I listen to a lot of podcasts and then talk radio. I've done that for years. So there's a lot of different subjects that we get to talking about, and a lot of different debates and things that go on the bus. And we just want to bring the fans into that and let them see a little bit of that. We get the questions of how we pass time and what we talk about. Now you're going to get a little bit of that.
That's true. I don't hardly ever listen to music when I'm commuting back and forth to Gadsden. I listen to a lot of audio books. I'm a big fan of legal thrillers like John Grisham, and I know Danny listens to some of that too. And but I've listened to some podcasts and audio books. I very rarely listen to music, like you said, unless we're trying to learn something new. So,
or unless we're new songs, we're listening to demos. We're listening to for new, which seems like this past 18 months we've really been listening to a lot of new songs for all these albums we're having to record. I was talking to a buddy of mine that we need to have on this podcast. That's another thing we're going to do is a lot of guests and different peoples from different areas of life and things that we deal with that we're interested in. We're going to try to get on to talk to everybody. But Scott Howard, Howie with Legacy 5 that I traveled with for about 4 years, he and I are still really good friends. He called me this morning, and we got to discussing just some things and off the wall things, so things like that can get just so many stories that we have from the road. We've been doing this a long time.
True.
And I mean, you're a lot younger than me, unfortunately. But how old are you? 38?
38.
38. I'm 48. So you're, golly, 10 years. But there's so many stories and great stories. Not just to me, what we remember the most are the funny ones. But
right.
This things like that. And Scott Howard was hilarious with so many different things. So we're going to have him on sometime, and we'll be. We know a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
So it's going to be neat to talk to a lot of those folks.
All these events that Gold City is hosting, we're going to have a lot of special guests there with us, groups and group members, and hopefully bring them on. And like you said, people that do the same thing that we do, and maybe some people that don't do the same thing that we do, just to kind of get a different perspective on life and things that we go through and how it is on the road for us, and maybe how that differs from other people. But I think that's really cool. And there's a lot about everybody knows a lot about Gold City. If you follow Gold City for any length of time, we have a lot of people that know as much as we do about Gold City. So this is kind of branching beyond that and getting into some things that kind of branch beyond Gold City. People we can kind of connect with you on a different level other than
we also get a lot
music.
of people that think they know a lot about Gold City, and they got half the story, and it's usually wrong, and we spend more time correcting it. So maybe we'll correct a lot of the stories that have been out there before. There's some even in our group that that thinks they have the right story that turned out to be wrong. So there's, because of the historical value of Gold City, 45 years with this, there's a lot of legend that goes with that.
Yeah.
And the storytelling. So we'll bring you a lot of that too. What's fascinates me a little bit and excites me a little bit about doing this is all the different areas that we can cover. And what I would love to see happen is for a fan base that's typically not your church crowd or Southern gospel crowd, that would also listen to this and find it fascinating. So there's things that we will probably get into that doesn't have anything to do with gospel music.
Yeah.
That we just enjoy discussing and talking about.
Sure.
And that can be all over the place with what we do. One of the things we're dealing with today is we're in Pensacola, Florida, and getting ready to go celebrate the life of our good friend Gary Jones, Taco, that was here for so long. The early years of Gold City, from 1981 until 1995, he was here and did all the production and arranging all those incredible Gold City hits of that era, the Ivan Parker area, Brian Free, when those guys were here, the Double Take Live, and hey, that might be a good name for this podcast.
Yeah,
maybe
could
Double
be.
Take. But that Double Take Live, moving up. What order did it go in? Double Take.
Well, Double Take was in '86.
Yep.
Then Moving Up was '87. Or was when
And
they were released.
Moving Up was so you had on Double Take Live. You had When I Get Carried Away.
Mm-hmm.
After I Bow was on there.
That's
Both
right.
of those were singles.
Great. Yep. Greatest of All Miracles. Were on there.
But it never singled.
No, I don't think that was a single. Cool Drink of
Cool
Water.
Drink of Water.
Was
that was a
single.
good song.
Yeah.
That was a good. We discussed that a little bit.
Yeah, we'd
About
wanted to
possibly
recut
recreating.
that. Yeah.
I think we should do that.
You know, that was the first. Double Take was the first album. Gary told me that, Eldridge Fox was their producer from the early days, from the early Heartwarming Benson days, all the way until the mid '80s. And Double Take was the first project that Gary kind of started co-producing.
And it was because he was already arranging all of that.
Right.
They from what I understand, and he and I talked about this a little bit, but they would get a song and he would have the arrangements because they had the live band.
Right.
So he had all that figured out before. All they did was take it into the studio, and then Foxy took it and said, "Here's what they do," and then the studio musicians played it and they cut it.
Yeah.
So Gary was already very influential on those earlier albums.
Sure.
But he did take a more prominent role on the Double Take Live album.
And that's another thing that, probably need to have a separate podcast about is the band.
Oh, man.
Back in those early days, they had all these guys that are now studio musicians that are cutting all these records for country and Christian and all genres. But you had Kelly Back in the
their
band,
teeth on
Daryl
music.
LaCroix.
Yeah.
Just all these band members that went on to do other things beyond gospel music.
Right. And a lot of and then a lot of other during that area, the Hensons had always had an incredible, but they all had live bands that they had live music. If they weren't just a piano, they had a live band.
Yeah.
But the Hensons, the Magruders always had an incredible band. Of course, the Kingsmen always had great band.
But Gary hired all those guys, with Gold City.
So a hilarious story, and I didn't know this, when we were in the studio to cut the Right Now album, that's our latest album that's out. Y'all go get that if you don't have it, and really be paying attention to Rise Up on the radio. That's Gary wrote that song. So the first day we were in there, Gary had brought in Kevin Williams to play on that album.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin, of course, if you follow gospel music, you'll see Kevin on all the Gaither stuff. He's the guitar player and does he does a lot of comedy, and
he's hilarious.
He's always chiming in. He's a very funny person, but he's also a great guy as far as just to talk to and be around. This is so funny to me. Gary he found out that Gold City needed a bass player, and so he young kid, obviously at the time. Gary was a young kid during all that. I mean, he was 18 when he started with Gold City. Kevin called Gary and had a tryout lined up, and his car broke down or something. I can't remember exactly. We need to talk to Kevin about that.
Yeah.
But his car broke down or something, and he couldn't make it, so he called, and back then, no cell phones, so he had to actually call a landline to get a hold, and I don't think he could get a hold of Gary. So he didn't make it, and then they ended up hiring Mark Hollander, and then Kevin ended up getting a job with Wendy Bagwell.
Yeah.
And was there, and I can imagine that bus with all the Wendy Bagwell stories. And
oh yeah.
But Kevin was telling us about that. So there were so many other people, prominent musicians that wanted to play in that band of gold that never got the opportunity to do it.
That's so crazy.
It is. And what does it look like if that? So the thing about it is, what does it look like if that if he goes and he becomes the bass player?
Right.
You know, it may that road may not work out where he's playing for Gates. It's just amazing how the Lord works with all of that.
It is. And not only with members but with songs. There's so many songs too that groups pass up and then they become hits for other groups.
Yeah. Or back in that day, they end up recording the same song and you get a debacle like they had on the moving up to Glory Land.
Yeah, moving up to
Leroy
Glory
had
Land.
pitched that song to the Cathedrals and to Gold City, and I didn't. Right. That's another story I had no earthly idea about. That, and Gerald Wolfe educated me on that. That they had the Gold City had it on hold.
Yep.
And did they cut it live?
They cut it first on like a heartwarming compilation or something like that, a tribute to Leroy.
Was that okay? And then ended up.
It wasn't on a main line or anything like that.
Okay, so that.
And then the Cathedrals ended up cutting it on live in
Atlanta.
Atlanta. But then after the first, I think, 500 copies that were pressed, they had to go back and repress it and took. So there's copies out there. I have both. I have both. Have it both ways.
Of course you do. You're talking about a gospel music historian.
I'm a collector, so I've got the record, the Live in Atlanta record with Moving Up to Glory Land, and the Live in Atlanta record.
Oh
without
wow!
it.
I've got the one that's got it on there.
Yeah.
That's the first time I'd heard it. I didn't know that story.
Yeah.
And Gerald was telling me all about that. So that's just things like that's what we're going to hopefully bring you on a lot of different areas. But the gospel music stuff, we know a lot of those stories, and if we hear about them, we'll track down who would know, like Gerald, and have them on and really talk about those days.
We want to invite everybody to Carolina Gold Gospel Fest, May 30th and 31st, 2025, at Brushy Creek Baptist Church in Taylor, South Carolina, hosted by our friend Rodney Balcom. This is a 2-day event with 3 sessions. You have an evening session, a matinee, and then another evening session the next day. It's going to include our friends the Booth Brothers, Karen Peck and New River, the Mark Trammell Quartet, Jeff and Sherry Easter, and the Promised Land Quartet. For all information and ticket info, please go to goldcityevents.com.
But like I was going to say, we're here in Pensacola to honor our friend Gary. And Gary was one of my closest friends. Talked to him just about every day. Past 3 or 4 years, I literally just about every day, sometimes multiple times a day. But he and I have been close friends since the Mercy's Mark days, and that's funny because you used to come hear us.
I did, and matter of fact, I had just graduated high school when Mercy's Mark was just getting, going good, and that was my dream to, be a part of a quartet, and I thought Mercy's Mark was the second coming of Gold City, because Gary, and they had that sound in your lead, and
similar sound.
They had a good bass, Chris West on the bass, and I just thought that's Gold City 2.0.
You know what's funny?
I wanted to be a part of that. Never got the chance to audition, but which I was young then anyway, but I guess I could
we would have probably gave you a pretty good shot there.
I mean, I'd been a young 18-year-old tenor singer.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So we what's funny about that group was one of the first conversations I had with Gary about it, because I was a huge Gold City fan, but I was also a huge Cathedral fan. Now I leaned more Gold City because of the music.
Right.
It was the Gary factor. Gary had a particular sound, and I don't know how to describe that. It was just something about what he did that just had a different sound about it.
It's outside the box of anything else.
It was, and it wasn't. It was nothing he was doing on purpose. It was just him. Now he was very broad in what he studied and listened to, and he was enthralled with jazz for a while. And I think that came across in a lot of stuff that he did.
Yeah.
But just to go back and watch something, I one of the things that I've watched a ton is the "Help Is on the Way" video where they're up. Are they in Kempton?
They're either Kempton or Dillsburg at the King's
I
Kids.
think it was Dillsburg.
Yeah.
I think that's where that was. But because you'd see a lot of videos from up there with the cathedrals in Gold City and
Pennsylvania.
And they were. It was. I think that was him and Hollander.
Yep.
No.
Or Fane.
It was Fane, and I guess Doug was Doug playing?
I think Doug had just started with him, so that would have been like 89.
Yeah, Mike was still there, and they were doing Help Is on the Way.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious to me because you see, this is one of my pet peeves, and Terry will tell you this, plays piano for us. I kind of ride him on not overplaying. Overplaying the piano drives me absolutely crazy. And it just kind of leaves, it's distracting. When you're singing a song and there's a lot of stuff going on, it's distracting from what you're trying to do. It's not that I don't appreciate their playing. I do. But so that if you haven't seen that, go on YouTube and just look it up. I don't know if we ever put it out, but go look. It's out there somewhere.
It's out there.
And it's you'll know it because they're outside. They're in a covered area, but it's like you can tell it's outside.
Yeah, it's a relaxed atmosphere.
Gary's on an upright piano, and that thing, and you hear Doug count it in, and then you hear that hit at the bass, and Gary's doing this stuff on the piano that's just crazy, but it's this jazzy sound, but it's Southern it's a gospel thing, but you can't explain it. But what was so funny, I tell every aspiring gospel music pianist, pay attention to what he's doing. He plays that intro. He doesn't overplay the intro. He does some crazy stuff in there, and if you're a piano player, you need to study that because it's incredible, the stuff that he did right in that little short intro.
Oh, yeah.
But then he just stops playing. So he's got the bass and the drums that are carrying the rhythm, and he's fixing his seat and looking at the crowd, and that was him anyway. He had ADD. He was ate up with ADD. He used to get on me about being that. He'd be talking to me, and I'd just wander out there in my mind somewhere while he said, "Over here, would you listen?" But he was worse than I was. But you can tell that's the way he played.
He was just filling in spots.
But every time he touched the keys, it had a purpose. And that's how he played. It was all very purposeful. And then there were times that he would eat it up. Man, he would just, good grief, what is he doing?
But now that you say that he was jazz influenced, that makes a lot of sense because that's what they do. In jazz, they're just filling in spots, and they're letting the bass or the whatever shine at that time. And
the song gives you an area to breathe,
right?
And it's relaxing. It's not smack them in the face the whole time. And that's something that, to me, I want to hear that. But then I want us to do that. I want us to always kind of keep it, everything having its own purpose.
Right.
But anyway, we're here celebrating his life. He found out about 5 weeks before he passed that he had lung cancer, and it's a thing that we had been dealing with. He's been struggling. So many people's asked me, and I can address it on this. He had been struggling with swallowing for a couple of years, and he thought it was just his esophagus an issue. Turns out he had a slow cancer growing in his lungs, and the tumor had pushed over into his esophagus. And what made him ultimately go to the hospital, because he's kind of like me, he don't want to go to the hospital, was that tumor was pushing into his vagus nerve, causing a very horrible spasmodic hiccuping deal, just to the point that he couldn't get a breath. And he would go 20 or 30 seconds without being able to draw a breath in, and which then that sets in the panic attacks. And so he fought as long as he could without going, and then he went to the hospital, and they did the x-rays and saw what was going on. And that wasn't, at that time, we were still pretty positive. They went in and did a debulking process on that tumor to give some relief, and then they put a stent in his esophagus so he could swallow. Somehow, whether it happened then or later or whatever, he had a tear in his esophagus, and he aspirated for a few weeks, and then long story short, lung collapsed. He became septic, and when he got back to the hospital, it was past the point of being able to do anything. It wasn't really the cancer that got him; it was all the other stuff that happened after that. So we've been really upset and sad, but at the same time, knowing what he would want us to do is keep plowing ahead and
absolutely
honor his legacy, and that's what we're going to do today.
And we, when he first found out he was sick, we set up a fund for Gary, and we just appreciate everybody that gave in that fund, and what you gave, go back toward expenses and things like that, because there's a lot of expenses with funeral expenses, but especially with cancer treatment and hospital bills and doctor's visits and all that, and so that helped his family a lot, I'm sure.
It has, and at some point Gary was very purposeful I'm actually going to address that today at the ceremony, at the service. He was on a mission to tell his testimony, and things had really changed in his life over the past 3 to 4 years. Some very sad circumstances that had happened, and where he was. Honestly, it was a miracle for him to be back. It was a miracle in a lot of different areas for him to be back producing, especially Gold City, because
right.
Obviously when you walk away from, he was a part owner of Gold City, and when that chapter closed in his life, you kind of get in your head where, well, I'm done with that. I'll never fool with that again. And so for him to come back to this, the way that all evolved, and we'll tell that story maybe soon, maybe one of the future podcasts we'll really focus on that, but we'll tell that story. He had a purpose with the songs that he was writing, and he had never been a lyric writer. He would have an idea, then he would go to any songs Gary ever wrote, he would go to someone. I remember some of the stuff off the Mercy's Mark album, he would have an idea and go to Kyla Rowland or Durrani Henson, and then they would write a great, like Prayer Will Take Heaven by Storm. He went to Kyla, and that was just a. So anyway, that's how a lot of that would evolve. But he had never been a lyric writer.
Yeah.
And the lyrics that he produced, one of the ones that gets me is on Right Now, is that A Fellowship Assembly of the Lost and Found.
Great line.
Like, what in the world? When he told me that, I went, what? Wait, what did you just say? And he said, Fellowship Assembly of the Lost but Found. And there's just so much like that he was doing. So a lot of that's just, to me, it was just the Lord really using him at this point in his life.
And I think about a lot here recently how, you said he had struggled with those symptoms that obviously wound up being cancer. He'd struggled with that for a while.
Yeah.
And I just can't help. We talked about this on stage the other day during sound check, but I just can't help. I can't get the thought out of my mind that God knew that was in his body.
Absolutely.
And when he brought you to Gold City, and your connection with Gary, you kind of reestablished and rebuilt that bridge between Gary and Gold City. Mm-hmm. And God, it was just a God thing for him to come back in and produce what would be, we didn't know it was going to be his, last efforts with Gold City, but we were just bringing him back in, because we knew that he was the only one that knew the sound.
And with the vocals that we have now.
And with the group that we have now, it's just we knew that he would know what to do with that. But just that line of progression, how God just orchestrated all this, and right now coming out, and like you said, Gary just finishing this 45 project right before he was diagnosed, and never knowing, but God knew that would, I think God had a purpose in that for Gary and for Gold City, for that to be, for him to allow that bridge to be mended, and for Gary to have this accomplishment.
I didn't know this was happening. He didn't know this was happening. I told him that I was going to help Gold City out for a little while. He said, well, you need to do that. That'd be good. And the first night we were going to be out was in Mobile, Alabama. Mm-hmm. Now, I got on the bus at midnight the night before.
Right.
So when I woke up, before all y'all, because you're road guys and not on the at home anymore, I got up at 6 or 7 o'clock, whatever it was, that I normally got up, and I have to have coffee. Well, I couldn't find the coffee. So I just got a bottle of water. I found a bottle of water, got out and walked, which I do all the time anyway. So I walked and saw a Waffle House. So I thought, I'm going to run down to the Waffle House, get some coffee, then I can get my day started. So when I went down there, I opened up Facebook, and he had posted a picture of the Waffle House sign.
That same Waffle House?
No.
Oh.
It was, so he had evidently, and he wrote, needed a little Waffle House stop on this road trip I'm about to take. Well, I went and commented below it. Of course, now the thing about it was he never posted anything. That was Gary's private guy.
Right.
But there was comments left and right from all over because it was Gary.
Yeah.
And so I commented down there, and I hope that road trip's got you headed toward Florida, because that's where he grew up, Pensacola. Well, he called me, and he said, I am headed to Florida. I posted a picture of the Waffle House, my mug, and then put that comment. He said, "Are you at Waffle House?" I said, "Yeah, I'm at Waffle House, and I am. Where are you?" He said, "I'm about 2 hours out of Mobile." I said, "Buddy, I'm sitting in the Waffle House in Mobile." And that's how it's like the Lord was lining that up.
Yeah, it's so crazy.
To the very details of something that minute. Waffle House, early morning Waffle House deal. But he was a couple of hours out. He stopped that night. You had met him before.
Well, just as a fan,
but
not really since I've been out here traveling.
And Jeff had met him some. He didn't know him well. And Danny knew him well, but it had been years since Danny had seen Gary.
Right.
So I said, "Gary, you got to stop." He said, "Man, ain't nobody want to see me," and that's the way he was. I said, "Gary, I want to see you."
Right.
He said, "Oh yeah, man, you could just go grab something to eat." I said, "Yeah," but these guys when they find out you're coming, they're gonna flip out. And y'all did, and y'all were all fangirling.
Oh yeah.
So it was a lot of healing that took place in that moment for him, because he would stay beat down with certain things,
right,
and have his self-worth was not what it should be at times, and he was going through some of that, and it all changed. What happened that day, it changed everything for him, and then he wanted to do it. But the first meeting with Danny, I asked him, I said, "What's your favorite albums Gold City ever did?" And I didn't know what he's going to say, because I knew Danny, but I didn't know him.
Right.
I didn't know that side of it. He said, he said Pillars of Faith. He said Pillars of Faith and Acapella Gold are the two that will probably never be touched.
Yeah.
And I said, "So you were a fan of Gary?" He said, "They ain't no bigger fan of Gary." He said, and see, Danny had engineered on a lot of that Acapella Gold stuff. He was just getting into the engineering world.
Right.
So that told me, okay, Danny's open to this, which in my mind went, okay, now.
Yeah.
If we could get Gary back with Gold City with these singers, that legacy moving forward, there might be something here. And that's when I went, all right, Lord, I'm not against it. And it all just started working out.
Yeah, that day that Gary stopped by, and there was other artists on that program with us, and I had
it was so funny.
One come up to me and he's like, "Is that Gary Jones?"
Yes. Well, what was hilarious is when I walked in. So I walked in and got hit by 2 or 3 different guys. Oh my gosh! Well, what is it? What's wrong?
Yeah.
It's you. You're filling in with Gold, and they were like, "This is awesome. This is
that's
what
right,"
we
because
wanted."
they didn't know you were
they
there.
Didn't know nobody knew.
Yeah.
This is what we wanted. This is what we were hoping you would do. You got to do this. You're gonna do it, right? Well, just chill. Relax, guys. And then when Gary walked in, it just everybody. I mean, it was funny how that all happened. There was probably 50 people at sound check.
Oh yeah, just spectators watching. Another cool moment when Gary first came back, the first time that he came back to the Gold City studio, where our compound that had the amphitheater,
he had produced all of that.
The studio, yes, where he had
Pillars
produced
of Faith,
all that.
Acapella Gold, and if you haven't heard Acapella Gold, fine. We've got to get that out on streaming platforms, because we've got Pillars of Faith out, but we've got to get that done.
But we went and found the original 2-inch tapes for Acapella Gold.
Yep.
And it was such a cool moment when we brought that in, and he held that in his hand again for the first time in 30 years.
That was all his responsibility.
In that studio where it was cut.
That was all his responsibility. He was the recording guy.
Yeah.
So he handled all of that. So he had held that. He's probably the person that set him on that shelf.
Oh yeah.
I mean, nobody else would have messed with him at that time. So
yeah,
it's crazy.
Because it'd been almost 30 years since he had been there.
Yeah.
And been in that studio, and
then the neat thing is you and I got to work with him in that studio.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very neat things that have happened for us just on a personal goal standpoint.
Oh yeah.
And a dream standpoint.
Sure.
And that's some of the things that we're going to get into with this podcast, and we hope you, the listener, will love it and pay attention to it. Do the whole like and subscribe thing if you can once it's out there, and we'll put it out and let everybody know where it's going to be, and hopefully we can do it at least once a week and keep the folks informed.
So we invite you to like and subscribe, push the bell notification so that you'll get notified when each podcast drops, and we hope that you'll subscribe, tell your friends to subscribe, share the link, and we'll see you back here next time.
See you later.